Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to the Great Lakes Health Radio program on Power 96.5 FM and WUFO 1080 AM. I am your host, Francesca Messiah from Kaleida Health, Manager Workforce Development, and I would like to thank you not only for listening, but for stopping me throughout the community. And what do I always ask? What would you like to hear? Is there a program, a topic we haven't covered? And I recently heard about a topic, and you're right, we haven't covered. We have not covered the orthopedics. And so I just want that listener to know who mentioned that to me the other day. I'm looking into that for you, for not only for you, but for all of our listeners. But first, before we begin the program, who is Kaleida Health? Because I always get that question. We are the hospitals. Buffalo General Medical Center, commonly known as BuffGen. We're Oshai Children's Hospital. That's a children's hospital. We're Gates Vascular Institute, adjacent to Buffalo General Medical Center. We're Millard Fillmore Suburban, out on Maple Road. We're the Visiting Nursing Association, the VNA. VNA open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they make home visits for our earliest, our youngest patient to our oldest patient. Think of us like that. We're DeGraff Medical Park in North Tonawanda. We have an adult clinic on Hurdle near Elmwood, between Delaware and Elmwood. We have Niagara Peds for children, as well as a pediatric center on Broadway Avenue across the street from the Broadway Market. We also have children's clinics throughout the Conventus building, which is adjacent to the Children's Hospital on Main and High. We have 2 women's health centers, one on Kensington Avenue and another one on Niagara Street, not too far from the Tops on Niagara Street. We have 2 long-term care facilities, one in North Tonawanda, part of DeGraff, and another one right here in Buffalo. And the one in Buffalo is High Point at the corner of High and Michigan Avenue. If you're interested in hearing any of our past programs, please visit www.kaleidahealth.org/videos. Again, that's www.kaleidahealth, KALEIDAHEALTH.org/videos. You can even pop one of our videos into a PowerPoint presentation, or you can share with any age you're interested in, because our topics cover all ages. Also, Kaleida remains available for outreach, public speaking, and either in person or virtual. Did you know Kaleida is hiring? Again, please check our website at kaleidahealth.org/careers. Again, for jobs and careers, kaleidahealth.org/careers, and come grow with us. There are many benefits, many reasons why you should grow with Kaleida. We have all types of advancement once you enter the system. Well, our guest for today is Benjamin Casper. Good morning, Ben. How are you?
Good morning, Francesca. Doing well. How about yourself?
Great. And Ben not only is he the injury prevention and outreach specialist, that's his title. When it comes to children and safety, Ben is an expert. He's just an overall wealth of information of how to keep our children, talking to adults, how to keep your nieces, your nephews, your children, your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, godchildren, how to keep the young people, or as Ben always says, the kiddos, how to keep our kiddos safe. How does that sound, Ben?
It sounds pretty good there. Thank you, Francesca.
And so Ben, the first question, because this program is focused on children, and we're calling today's program Concussions. That means brain concussions and children's safety. So our first question for the morning: why should listeners, even listeners such as myself without children, be aware of childhood injuries, and also not only the injuries, but be aware of the tips for prevention.
Well, a lot of the things that we kind of can cover, it kind of crosses over into the adult world as well. And we all have exposure to children, whether they're the nieces, the nephews, whether you're babysitting a friend's child or kiddo, as I like to phrase, I guess.
Right.
But a lot of these things do transfer over, especially when it comes to injury, concussions, and a lot of the safety tips, because a lot of things as adults, sometimes we need a little brush up on the importance of staying safe in the community.
That is wonderful. Yeah, it's so important because, like you said, many of the things that we talk about children and safety do cross into the adult world. And let's begin with concussions. Concussions, a lot of times it's always on the news. A lot of times we hear about football players and concussions, although we know you can fall off a bicycle and concussions. What is a concussion and why is it so serious?
Well, a concussion is kind of like a mild traumatic brain injury or like a transient disturbance of brain function. And the reason why it's getting a lot of, a lot of needed publicity right now is because there's still a lot that's kind of unknown about concussions. And a lot of times your symptoms won't necessarily appear right away, right after the injury takes place. And as we find out more about it, and everybody's body's a little bit different, there's really a high emphasis, especially with kids in sports. A lot of times we're seeing this, that we really want to bring awareness to this because there can be some pretty detrimental effects as a result for not, pulling your kids from that physical activity where you could re-injure. And that's why it's really important to kind of know some of the signs and symptoms that are associated with concussions.
And I know again you talk about that, and I know we talk about concussion many times. You hear about football, but where else are children exposed to concussions? And I know I've taken some notes here. It says falling out of a high chair. Can you fall out of a high chair and get a concussion? Does it have to be a physical blow? I know some of our apartment buildings here in Buffalo or homes don't have screens. So talk about that. Like, are those also concussions?
Well, yes, they could be concussions or maybe even a more significant injury. But anytime that you have pretty much a blunt force or you have any type of impact to your head, you're susceptible to possibly having a concussion or even a more major like traumatic brain injury. So a couple of things to really kind of look out for is, how somebody's behaving, the mechanism of the injury that actually took place. Falling out of a high chair onto, say, if you're out on a patio and it's on cement, that can be some cause for pretty significant concern. Falling any great length of distance, getting hit with like a bat or a golf club or something along that line, or just having head-to-head contact in many sports, even soccer, or you can still have those collisions, and you can have those blunt forces that you kind of take to the head there. And I guess it probably is only appropriate to talk about some of the symptoms that you'd kind of look out for after that. And some of those signs and symptoms include, like, well, obviously, if you hit your head, you're probably going to have a headache. You could have a brief loss of consciousness or pass out. You can have dizziness or like have balance issues, sensitivity to light, sensitivity to sounds. You can be confused, irritable, nauseous, vomiting. There's a whole slew of different things. You can have your irritability and trouble falling asleep, trouble sometimes being more sleepy than normal. And sometimes people will just state that they just don't feel right. They might have like a brain fog or something along that line. Those are all things that you really want to be aware of. And anytime that you have any of those symptoms, if it's involved with doing an activity, you want to stop doing that activity. It's, if it's a sporting event, it's better to miss one game than the whole season and have maybe even longer lasting effects. So Just something, and there's a lot of the coaches and parents and community members are starting to get that increased awareness of how important our brains are, and when you bruise the brain, there could be some severe consequences down the line.
Yeah, and I guess part of the question, I just want people to understand, because concussions in the news, they always want to talk about football. There are women now playing football. I know in high schools, some of the high schools now have flag football for women. But the point that I'm also trying to make is that concussions can happen to girls as well as boys. So I just want to make sure our listeners know. I know the media normally only talks about boys and concussions, but girls and concussions. How about only because I just recently read an article. How about throwing up? If someone falls and they stand and they start throwing up, is that another sign that you could have a concussion if you begin vomiting after you've been hit hard?
Oh, absolutely. And it could be concussion or maybe even something a little bit more significant. But yes, that's definitely a common sign. And that's a very good point that, it doesn't, concussions don't discriminate based off of age, race, gender. Everybody is susceptible to it. You just see it a little bit more prevalent with the higher contact sports, but I've seen it in anything from, skiing to like, well, lacrosse, any sport or any activity really, you're going to be susceptible. It's a possibility to get a concussion with that
Right.
impact for sure.
And soccer, I just thought about women's soccer. That had. I just want our listeners to know that it's not just the guys who are getting them. Women are playing lacrosse. Young girls are playing lacrosse. Young girls are playing soccer. Young girls are playing softball. So a concussion can affect either or, male or female. Okay, how about water safety? It's still warm. It's going to be, we have global warming, so we never really know when our cooler weather is going to hit. But water safety, again, water safety, many times we think about a pool or a lake, but can water safety be as simple as a bathtub?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of times it really kind of depends on the age, to where like the greatest likelihood of having like an impaired safety event happen. The bathtub, obviously for those younger individuals, the 0 to basically birth to like 1 year, 2 years of age, but primarily that first 4 months of life, the bathtub is a significant risk. And the main takeaway there is, well, you only need enough water to cover the nose and mouth, and especially for the younger children, the infants, the newborns, they really don't have that control to roll over on their own and things like that. So the biggest takeaway there is supervision and monitoring the bathtub water. The temperature itself, just to make sure it's not too cold, not too warm, and so that's for the bathtub. And then as you get into swimming pools, people are still out there swimming and things like that. And again, supervision, having a designated water watcher, having a physical card or something like that, so somebody has something that they can hang on to and they know that they're responsible for everybody in the pool, and to have that person be distraction free. We all have phones and we all are distracted, so to make sure that you're not looking at your phone and doing things like that is very important. And when it comes to the natural bodies of water, that's where you see the most drownings take place with your adolescent age group. And when you're dealing with different currents, like we have rivers and lakes and streams, and you just don't necessarily know, and you can't see the bottom. And so therefore too, you want to make sure that you're using the appropriate like life jackets and things along that line. And when you kind of go into life jackets too, it's there's a lot of different devices that are out there that they kind of coin themselves or market themselves to being something to help somebody swim, or some people kind of perceive them as being life jackets, but you want to make sure that they are U.S. Coast Guard approved, to actually be a life-saving device. just as another keynote to any listeners.
Yes, and if you're just joining our program, we're talking about concussions and children's safety. And now we've already talked about concussions in football and girls lacrosse and girls soccer, but also we've talked about concussions if you're just falling out of a high chair, the seriousness of it. We just covered water safety from a bathtub and an infant to a pool to a lake. And something else we just talked about with water safety, life jackets. Now, and I know, gosh, we probably could have a whole show on life jackets. Should they be proper? What's the inflation? Like, don't just, what should we say? Just don't put on a life jacket. To put on a life jacket, you should make sure it's properly inflated and such, correct?
Well, yeah, it really ultimately depends on what type of life jacket that you have. There are some inflatable types. There are some that are not. But you want to make sure that you're getting them from like a reputable site and that it's, Coast Guard approved. They'll generally put that all over the markings there. And you want to make sure that you have the appropriate weight and size requirements too, because there's obviously different size kiddos. And so there's different size life jackets that can help keep them afloat. Especially when like hazardous water conditions and things like that.
Yeah, and I know sometimes like on a boat, I'll ask, so if an adult can't swim, and should they be wearing a life jacket on the boat?
Well, my general takeaway is that whether you can swim or not, a lot of things can happen. If somebody loses control, you get struck by another boat, you become unconscious, whatever the case may be. So I don't even think it really matters on your ability to swim. You should just always you wear a life jacket, especially when you're out on the open water. There are some various laws and things like that in New York State. New York State's generally a little bit more conservative, which is a good thing when it comes to their laws. And generally for certain boats that are like smaller vessels, like if you're under basically under 12 years old, you have to wear a life jacket on any type of vessel like that, especially for the smaller ones. And but I know one thing that always is a takeaway at my household is I have to practice what I preach. So even if I was an avid swimmer and I was going out and doing something and by law I didn't need to, I would do always err on the side of caution and make it so that I would wear a life jacket to set a good example for my children. And it's the same with like bike helmets and things like that. It's always better to lead by example, and instead of do what I say, not as I do. You want to really show them the right way.
Yes, and that's so important because listening to the news. And they say there are more boats on the highway. There are more boats, and there are more of everything. Like there are snowmobiles in the winter. So by that saying, that's just another way of saying there's more. If there's more of something on the road, if it's cars, meaning there's more chance of having an accident. So like you just said, Ben, erring on the side of caution. Okay, you know what? Something you just talked about, Are bike helmets, is it the law that you have to wear those in New York State? Are you aware?
Yes. If you're under 14 years of age, you by law have to wear a bike helmet, and I guess and their parents I think are susceptible to up to like a $50 fine if they are not wearing one. But it's the same thing to kind of go with it. You really should be wearing them throughout your adulthood as well, because especially with distracted drivers and things like that, even if you are a very good cyclist, you can't trust everybody else on the roadways or whatever it is that you're doing, and accidents do happen. So it's you encourage. We're a level 1 pediatric trauma center at Oshai Children's, and we serve people up to their 19th birthday for our traumatic events. And I can tell you firsthand that those that do wear bike helmets and they are struck have a less likelihood of experiencing a significant head injury. So it's the gear is there. It's if you know what, and if a listener is on and they can't necessarily afford one, please feel free to reach out to me. We distribute about 300 bike helmets throughout our community every year. So, thanks to Kiwanis of Buffalo, we're able to do a lot of injury prevention that can really focus on those that can't necessarily maybe afford all of the protective equipment that they'd like to have. So.
And Ben, I know I've had you at Juneteenth. You've been out at a lot of different things on the West Side, Lower West Side, and a lot of children now have fancy hairdos with braids and those kind of things. What's your recommendation on a fit for a bike helmet?
That's actually a really good question there. Not to say that your other questions are not, but that is that's an obstacle that we do see, especially people that have really intricate and fancy braids and beads and different things like that. That does make it difficult to have an appropriately fitted helmet. A lot of times, what we do is we'll utilize an adult size, large, extra large helmet to accommodate that, but it's still quite uncomfortable when you have a lot of beads and things like that in your hair to have something that's snug. So it's something to keep in mind as you kind of decide what kind of hairdo you're thinking about getting when it comes to putting a protective piece of equipment on your head. But yeah, it definitely adds to the complexity of all of that for sure.
Right. And when it's a free bike giveaway, I know you give away bike helmets as well as others. I'll make sure we get your phone number. Tell them that if your child has braids or extensions or whatever beads, you need a larger helmet. Don't let someone give you a small helmet because number one, the safety outlasts the comfort. It may not be as comfortable. However, we want you to keep your hairstyle. So you might have a male or female. So you would definitely have to go to the next size bike helmet versus someone with a straightened hairstyle or an afro. So please consider that and just don't let someone give you a helmet because it should fit. If you have the different hairstyles, you will need, it sounds like Ben is saying, to go up a size in the helmet.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why whenever we go to these the various community events throughout the region, we size it right then and there, just so we make sure that we're giving the appropriate helmet to the appropriate child or adult. I order a bunch of adult size helmets as well because I have the conversation with whoever comes to the table, and and I have the frank conversation. It's like, if I give you a helmet, are you going to wear it? Because it only works if you wear it.
Yeah.
And I extend it to the parents too if they don't have one, but if they say that they will wear one if one was distributed to them, well, then I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Sunstroke. When you lay out in the sun, I know sometimes all colors, all complexions, all ethnicities many times enjoy the feeling of the sun. If you lay out in the sun too long, sometimes you'll start getting dizzy. It's called a heat stroke. Do children get heat strokes the way adults can get a heat stroke?
Yeah, kids are pretty unique because they compensate very well until they do not any longer. And so they can change their condition quite quickly. Their containers are a little bit smaller. And so, key things to really look out for and to help your body is to stay hydrated. If it's hot outside, you want to make sure that you're hydrated. And a heat stroke is just basically your body's not able to control your temperature, and you control temperature by sweating, or at least to cool down. And so when you go from into a heat stroke, that generally means that patient is going to be, or that person is going to be dry, and they're not able to compensate anymore for how hot it is. And then your temperature can go up to like 106 degrees Fahrenheit in, like 10 to 15 minutes, which is significant. And you can have, and really adverse effects when that does happen. And so you want to make sure you stay hydrated and you take cool down breaks.
Right. Yeah. So you don't want to just lay out in the sun, drink some water, some juice, something, because heat strokes are very uncomfortable. It can cause dizziness. It can cause nausea. You can just throw up. I mean, it is not. It's not pleasant. Car safety. Anything we should know about car safety in warmer months? Again, our summers are longer versus cooler months. Anything with for anyone who's in a car seat, anything they should know about?
Yeah, so the car seats, well, especially in the summer months, I encourage caregivers to put something that's very that's important to whatever their travel is. That's obviously not going to be a danger to the child being a flying obstacle, but if you can secure something or have like your say like a purse or a wallet, and you secure it in the back seat with the child because you don't want to obviously leave your child in a hot car. That can lead to injury, heat stroke, including up to death. Unfortunately, you have to have that real conversation because it does happen. But just to make sure to have some type of a routine so you don't leave your child unattended in a car, even if you crack the windows. That a car can heat up very, very quickly.
So what you're saying is make sure you have something important in the back that you're not going to forget because you don't want to forget your kid.
Exactly. Obviously your kid is important in the back, but as any parent knows, you're multitasking, you're doing a ton of different things. Sometimes you can, and sometimes you're sleep deprived. All these things can contribute to you not necessarily behaving the way that you normally do. And, you want to prevent, the chances for having that type of an accident by leaving your child in the car, especially during warmer months. And you want to make sure that you have the appropriate car seat for your kiddo. And we have fitting stations all throughout. We do fittings at Oshai Children's. We work with a lot of community partners, and we're happy to make sure that you do have the right seat. It's in the right direction for your child. And over half of all car seats are installed incorrectly, some to varying degrees than others. But that's another resource that we offer to the community.
Sure. Ben, I'm just going to say, just if you could give your phone number because we are out of time.
Absolutely. It's area code 716-323-2624.
One more time, 716?
323-2624.
Thank you. And I want to thank Benjamin Casper, Injury Prevention and Outreach Specialist at Oshai Children's Hospital, part of Kalida, for being our guest today, where we've talked about concussions for children, boys and girls. We've talked about safety in the water. We've talked about sunscreen. Well, we didn't really talk as much about sunscreen. We talked about heat stroke. We talked about car safety. If you haven't heard our show, you want to hear it again, please visit our website, www.kalidahealth.org/videos. You'll be able to get this program. It's just so important. Next week, you'll hear from my esteemed colleague from ECMC, Cindy Bass. And 2 weeks from now, God be willing, you'll hear from me, Francesca Messiah, Manager, Workforce Development from Kalida Health. Bye-bye.